Sala Ferliger and Esther Perel were Polish Jews, Polish Yidden, who wound up in the camps. Sala was in the woods for an entire year, and then 4 years in camps. Itzik spent time in 14 camps, 6 months in Siberia. At the end of the war, they met, somehow ended up in Belgium, and Esther Perel, who's a dear friend and a great teacher and healer to many of us, is here tonight to share something about their story and hers.
Most Sunday afternoons, my parents would play cards, burako. And they would invite friends to come over. My mother would bake her crumb cake, and they would drink tea, boiling tea, which you took a piece of sugar, you put it in the mouth, and then you drank the hot water over the piece of sugar. Some of you must know that tradition. I could never understand how they couldn't burn their mouth. And as they would play the cards, somebody would say, so whatever happened to Moshe Strauss? Der ist verbrannt, der ist vermordet. This one was gassed, this one was murdered. And this was just like, there was no rating system in my house, no filters. Stuff and information was just passed on as if you were talking about the weather. And I remember hearing these conversations, half in Yiddish, half in English, and a little bit like, this one he didn't manage well, and hat sich eine Neize gegeben, and hat sich nicht eine Neize gegeben, and this one managed, and this one was not dumb gad. And it was this kind of, conversations about how people lived in the camps. My parents had absolutely no sense of child development. Of when you should tell a story to whom, when, what, and so forth. If I asked my mother around age 4 what was the number on the arms, she just flat out would say, Auschwitz. And I had to ask, what was Auschwitz? If I said, why didn't I have grandparents? She said, vergast and vermordet. It just would child development didn't enter into my parents, but it also took a long time to enter into me. And their concept of protection had nothing to do with being next to you if something bad was to happen. Their concept of protectiveness was that I should be able to survive if they're not around. So protectiveness was to leave me completely on my own so I could figure it out. But if I tell you that so many of the children in Antwerp pretty much had the same notion, all of this to us seemed completely normal. In fact, I never heard the word 2G or second generation until I met Eva Vogelmann, which was years later in America. So in my community in Antwerp, there were two groups of people. Those who did not die and those who came back to life. Those who did not die were the people whose homes I would go to, and it was morbid. Plastics on the couches, and people who lived rather tethered to the ground, not able to trust anybody, and certainly not able to enjoy too much, because if you were enjoying, it meant you were not watching out. And you never knew what could happen, so you couldn't really have too much pleasure without too much guilt. And those who came back to life, of which my parents were part of, really decided that they were going to embrace life with zest. But so much so that all the stories would mix. Years later, I'm in New York. I have one boy. I think I by then have 2 boys. But my older son, Adam, is voraciously watching and reading about the Titanic. And he's asking me questions all the time. And all I think is he's curious. He must be like me. He's asking a lot of questions. And when he says, and what happened? I give him the facts. And that many people died, and that many people jumped, and only a few of them could get on the raft. And I'm thinking, and he's getting more and more agitated, and I don't understand why. Because I don't have a sense of child development either. Nobody protected me, nobody protects him. Nobody told me this will not happen again. How did I know this? I should say something like that. So my husband, Jack, comes to me and he says, maybe you should tell him that the Titanic only happened once. It doesn't happen every day, And so I went, it's like, seriously, it didn't occur to me that one could reassure a child and one could say it won't happen again, because nobody ever bothered telling me it won't happen again. And not only was it like that, but it was also the sense that you can't be too vulnerable about it. Because the rule was this: the vulnerable die. So you either have to be very, very strong or you don't make it. And then I decided, here I am, on the one hand, telling their story because I do want to tell the intergenerational legacy of all of this. But I also wanted to tell where I decided to break the intergenerational legacy. And where I chose to make a repair, which was that I was going to give the permission to my kids to be vulnerable. And that I was not going to just prepare them for survival in case they land in the camps, because that's not the life that I wanted to pass on to them. And so I find myself wanting to repeat some stories and wanting to leave others behind. Thank you.